My name is Nadia Calloway. I'm 27 years old. 12 years ago, on the coldest, wettest night of November, my father pointed at the front door and said 7 words that carved themselves into me like initials in bark. "You are not my daughter anymore." I was 15. I had $34 in my jacket pocket, a dead cell phone, and nowhere to go. The reason I was standing there, jacket half-zipped, shoes untied, staring at the man who used to push me on a swing set, was a lie, a specific, calculated, breathtakingly cruel lie that my 13-year-old sister had been building for 3 weeks before she detonated it. They believed her without a single question. 90 minutes later, I was unconscious on the side of Mercer Road. The storm had turned the gutters into rivers. A car had clipped me. I was lying in 2 inches of rainwater with a fractured wrist and a gash along my temple that was bleeding into my hair. And the woman who found me, the woman who stayed at my bedside all night, who called the hospital staff by name, who held my hand when I woke up confused and terrified, she wasn't a stranger. She was Josephine Adeyemi, the most decorated civil rights attorney in our state, a woman whose name was on courthouse plaques, a woman whose face had been on the cover of 3 national magazines. When my father walked into that hospital room and realized who was sitting in the chair beside my bed, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He said, "How did you can't be here." And she looked at him with those calm, dark eyes and said, "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The question is whether you are." That night changed the entire trajectory of my life. Last spring, I stood at the podium of the State Innovation and Equity Summit as the opening keynote speaker. There were 1,100 people in that auditorium. My face was on the program cover. My name was on the banners. And somewhere in row 6, my sister Priya sat between 2 colleagues from her employer, one of the event's corporate sponsors, completely unaware that the speaker they'd been told to watch was the sister she'd spent 12 years pretending was dead. Before I tell you what happened when she looked up and saw my face, please take a second to like this video and subscribe if these kinds of stories speak to you. I put everything into every single one of them, and your support is the reason I keep sharing. And I genuinely love to know where in the world you're watching this from. Drop your city in the comments below. It's one of my favorite parts of doing this. Okay, let me take you back. There's something you should understand about my family before I explain that night. We weren't loud, we weren't dramatic. From the outside, we looked like a completely normal, functional household in a mid-sized city. Dad worked in municipal planning, Mom was an occupational therapist. We had a beagle named Pepper and a minivan with a broken side mirror that Dad kept saying he'd fix and never did. We had dinner together most nights. We went to church on Easter and Christmas. We took 1 vacation a year, usually somewhere with a beach. We looked fine, but inside that house, there was an invisible scale, and it was never, ever balanced. I was the firstborn. I learned to read early, learned to be quiet early, learned to make myself easy. Easy to manage, easy to overlook, easy to dismiss. Not because anyone told me to, just because I picked up, the way children do, that being low maintenance was how I earned my place. Then Priya came along, 18 months after me, and she was different from birth. Loud, magnetic, emotionally volcanic. When Priya cried, the whole house shifted. When Priya laughed, the whole room turned toward her, like sunflowers. She didn't demand attention, she simply occupied it, naturally, completely, the way gravity occupies space. Mom loved us both, I believe that, but her nervous system was calibrated to Priya. I was 12 when I came home from school with a perfect score on my state assessment, top 2% in the district. My teacher had written exceptional in red ink at the top of the paper and circled it twice. I walked in the back door, held it up. Mom was on the phone. She mouthed, "That's great, honey," pointed at the refrigerator, and turned back to her call. I put the paper on the counter. That night, Priya came home from gymnastics practice upset because her coach had corrected her form in front of the class. She'd been embarrassed. Mom sat with her at the kitchen table for 45 minutes, rubbed her back, made her hot chocolate with the mini marshmallows that were technically supposed to be for baking, told her she was brave and strong, and that her coach just didn't understand how sensitive she was. My assessment paper sat on the counter all week. No one ever put it on the refrigerator. That was the pattern. My achievements were milestones. Priya's setbacks were emergencies. Both occupied the same emotional real estate in our house, but Priya's always got the bigger room. When I was 14, I won a regional essay competition on urban infrastructure and got a $25 gift card and a certificate from the city council. I showed it to Dad at dinner. "Nice job, Nadia Bear," he said. "Pass the salt." 2 weeks later, Priya came in second place in her regional gymnastics. Not first, second. And Mom cried, actual tears. "We are so proud of you, Bug. Second in the whole region. Do you know how incredible that is?" They framed her ribbon. I want to be careful here because this isn't about bitterness. I didn't hate my sister. I didn't even fully understand what was wrong at the time. I just knew I existed in a different atmosphere than she did, like I was breathing slightly thinner air all the time and had stopped noticing it because I didn't know what full oxygen felt like. But Priya noticed the difference, and she learned young that it was hers to keep. She started small, the way all patterns start, too quiet to hear, too gradual to feel. When I was 14, my favorite gray hoodie went missing, the one with the astronomy club logo I'd saved up for. It vanished from my room. 3 weeks later, I saw it in the back of Priya's closet when I was looking for a belt she'd borrowed. "That's mine," I told her, reaching for it. She turned around, crossed her arms. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Priya, my name is literally on the tag. I wrote it in marker when I bought it." She looked at the tag, back at me. "Mom gave it to me because it didn't fit you anymore." "I wore it last Tuesday." "You're lying." I stood there, holding my own hoodie, and felt something go sideways in my chest. Not anger, confusion, the kind that makes you question your own memory. Mom's voice came up the stairs. "Girls, keep it down." Nadia took something from my room. And just like that, I was the aggressor. I was the problem. I handed the hoodie back because the alternative was a scene, and I was always the one who avoided scenes. Priya watched me leave her room. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The taking got worse. Books, headphones, a birthday card from my friend that she'd opened before I got home. When I mentioned things to Mom, I got a, "Nadia, you lose things constantly. Are you sure?" When I mentioned things to Dad, I got a, "She's your little sister, let it go." I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door. My phone was at 4% battery. The door closed behind me, and the rain, which had been threatening all week, opened up like a wound. I stood on the porch for 30 seconds, maybe a minute. I kept thinking, he'll open the door, he'll call my name, he'll come out and say he overreacted, that they need to talk this through properly, that this isn't how we handle things. The porch light flickered. The door stayed closed. I stepped off the porch. The rain was immediate and total. Within half a block, I was soaked through my jacket. The wind was coming from the east, sharp and mean, and it pushed against me with the kind of indifference that only weather and strangers can manage. My sneakers were thin, wrong shoes for November rain. I hadn't grabbed a hat, hadn't grabbed gloves, hadn't grabbed anything except the jacket and the $34 I'd been meaning to give back to my friend Cassie for the pizza we'd split on Monday. I pulled out my phone, 4%. I called my friend Bree, straight to voicemail. I called Marcus from school, rang and rang. Sent a text to Cassie, "Can you call me, please? It's urgent." The screen went dark as I hit send. Phone dead. I walked. I didn't have a direction, just away from that house, that kitchen table, my father's turned back, my mother's downcast eyes, my sister's performance on the couch. I walked and the rain came down in silver sheets, and the wind pushed me sideways on every corner, and I thought about those messages on the tablet, how specific they were, how precisely constructed, and I thought, she's been planning this. She's been building this for weeks, and she waited for the right moment, and I never saw it coming. And then I thought, of course I didn't, because I never thought she would go that far. I thought she took my hoodies. I thought she told small lies. I didn't know what she actually was. That thought made me walk faster, like I could outpace it. There was a coffee shop 2 miles from our house that stayed open late on weekends. I thought if I could get there, I could sit in the warmth, charge my phone, figure out what to do. Maybe call Bree again, maybe call Cassie, maybe sit in a corner booth and just breathe. The walk felt like the inside of a washing machine. My hair was in my eyes, puddles had taken over the sidewalk in several places, and I waded through them because going around meant stepping into the street, and the street was fast-moving and loud, and the headlights of passing cars were blurring in the rain, until each one looked like a comet. I was almost to the intersection at Mercer Road and Howell. I have run the sequence of what happened next through my memory so many times that the details have become permanent. The specific texture of the rain, the smell of the storm drain to my left, the way my sneaker caught on a raised section of broken curb, not because I wasn't watching, I was watching, I was being careful, but because the water rushing along the gutter had hidden it, made the surface look flat and continuous. My foot caught. I went sideways. My shoulder hit the curb hard, then my head, and that was it. I don't know how long I was down. I know it was raining. I know there was the sound of a car pulling over, fast, close. I know the sound of a door opening, footsteps on wet pavement, and then a voice, calm, clear, authoritative, cutting through everything. Hey, I see you. Don't move. Stay still. A hand on my shoulder, warm through the cold. Can you hear me? Blink if you can hear me. I blinked. Good, you're okay. I'm calling 911. Stay with me. Her voice on the phone. I need an ambulance at the corner of Mercer and Howell. A teenage girl has fallen, possible head injury. She's conscious but disoriented. Yes, Mercer and Howell. I'm staying with her. She crouched down beside me, shielded my face from the rain with her body. What's your name? I told her. It came out blurry. Nadia. Okay, good name. I'm Joe. You're going to be okay. My parents, I said. Can you call my parents? A pause. Of course. What's their number? I gave it to her, watched her dial, watched her face as she listened. She hung up without leaving a message, and something shifted in her expression. Not confusion exactly, more like something being confirmed. Nadia. Her voice was gentle. Were you out here alone tonight, in this storm? I thought about my father's turned back, the door that didn't open. Yes, I said. She didn't ask why, not then. She just pulled off her coat, a long, good coat, the kind that cost real money, and laid it over me like a blanket. The sirens were already getting closer. I'm not leaving, you hear me? I'm not leaving until someone is responsible for you. I closed my eyes. The pavement was hard and cold, and the rain was still coming, and everything hurt. But I believed her. And I don't know why, because I had no reason to trust anyone's promises that night. But I believed her. Before I tell you what happened at that hospital, I need to ask you something. Has there ever been a moment in your life when your family chose someone else's story over yours, when you knew the truth and couldn't make anyone hear it? Drop a yes in the comments if you've been there. You're not alone. And if this story is hitting close to home for you, please hit that like button. It matters more than you know. Okay, back to the hospital. I don't remember arriving. My first clear memory is the smell, antiseptic and something floral like a hand lotion, machines beeping, the specific hum of fluorescent lights, and that voice, Joe's voice, steady and professional in the hallway outside, talking to someone. She has a hairline fracture in the wrist, and the laceration on her temple required 4 stitches. The concussion is mild, but she needs observation. A different voice. Are you family? I'm the person who found her. I'm staying. Ma'am? I'm Josephine Adeyemi. I'm a licensed attorney, and until I understand why a 15-year-old girl was alone in a major storm on a November night, I am not leaving this building. Silence on the other end of that conversation. The name had landed. I found out later that she'd tried my parents twice before the ambulance arrived. Dad had silenced her calls. The second time, he'd picked up, heard it was about me, and said, "Is she hurt?" And when Joe said, "Yes, she needs medical attention," he said, "We'll be there when we can," and hung up. When he arrived 2 hours later, Joe was sitting in the chair beside my bed. She had her work bag on her lap, a legal brief open, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked like she'd rearranged her entire evening without complaint. Dad walked in with Mom behind him. Priya wasn't with them. He stopped when he saw Joe, and I was awake enough to watch his face do the full sequence: recognition, confusion, shock, shame, all in about 4 seconds. "You're," he started. "Josephine Adeyemi, yes." She closed the brief, set it in her bag, removed her glasses. "And you're the Callaways. I've been trying to reach you for 2 hours. There was a situation at home. Your 15-year-old daughter is the situation," she said, level, professional, not cruel, just completely firm. "She has a fractured wrist and a concussion. She was alone in a storm, and before she lost full consciousness, she told me she'd been sent outside by her parents." "That's a mischaracterization," Dad said. "Mr. Callaway, I've spent 30 years in courtrooms. Do not mischaracterize what I just said to you." Mom made a sound, soft and pained. "We had a discipline situation," Dad said. "What kind of discipline requires a child to stand in a storm? She's 15. We expected her to call a friend. We didn't expect—" "You didn't expect," Joe said, and for the first time there was something sharp under the calm, "that the child you put outside would get hurt. No, people rarely do. That's why it's still wrong." Dad looked at me then. I was lying there with a bandaged wrist and 4 stitches along my temple and a hospital gown that was too large. Something moved through his face, something I hadn't seen before. "Nadia?" "I'd like you to step outside," Joe said, standing, "both of you. I need to speak with the attending physician, and there's a social worker I've asked to come speak with the family." "A social worker? We're her parents." "Yes, and that's what we're going to discuss." She walked them out. I heard her speaking to the doctor in the hallway, her voice dropping low. Professional, measured, relentless. She was back inside 10 minutes, sat back down, looked at me. "How are you feeling?" "Strange," I said. My voice was rough. "That's the concussion. It'll pass." She paused. "Do you want to tell me what happened tonight? Not for anyone else, just for you." I told her, all of it. The messages, the tablet, the accusation, my father's turned back, the door that didn't open. My voice kept breaking in places I wasn't expecting. I didn't know I was going to cry until I was already doing it. She listened without interrupting. She didn't rush me. She didn't give me that particular expression adults give teenagers when they're deciding to believe them. She just listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Do you want to go home when you're discharged?" she asked. I thought about it. My ribs ached, my wrist throbbed, and I thought about walking back through that front door, past Priya on the couch, past my mother's worried distance, past my father's turned back. "No," I said. "I don't." She nodded once. "Then we'll figure out another way." I didn't know what that meant. I was 15 and exhausted, and my head hurt, and I didn't have the bandwidth to ask. I just held the words, "We'll figure out another way." For the first time in hours, I wasn't afraid. 2 days later, a social worker named Pamela came to talk to me. She had close-cropped hair and patient eyes, and she asked every question twice in different ways, which I later learned was how she made sure she was getting the truth. Joe had spoken with her before I did. When Pamela asked if I wanted to go home, I said no again, clearer this time. When she asked where I wanted to go, I didn't have an answer. Joe knocked on the door, stepped in. "There's an option," she said, looking at me. "If you want it, I have a guest room. I'd like to offer it. Temporarily, through the proper channels, until we figure out what makes sense." I stared at her. "You don't know me," I said. "I know enough." She sat at the edge of my bed. "I know you told the truth tonight. I know you have a fractured wrist, and you earned it walking through a storm rather than going back to a house where you weren't believed. And I know," she paused, "that when I was 19, someone took a chance on me when they didn't have to, and it was the difference between where I ended up and where I might have." I didn't say anything. The ward was quiet around us. "You don't have to decide now," she said, "but the offer is real." I decided that afternoon. I chose different. Priya would keep the house, the couch, the brand new Instagram account, the boy from school, the parents who turned her side of the scale into an unquestioned truth. I would choose something harder and better. The first weeks at Joe's house were the strangest of my life. Not hard exactly, strange. Like being a plant that had been growing sideways toward a small window and suddenly being placed somewhere with full light. The adjustment is real. The body doesn't immediately know what to do with the space. Joe's house was on a tree-lined street 3 miles from where I'd grown up. It was full of books, not arranged decoratively but actually used, spines cracked, bookmarks of all kinds sticking out, stacks on every surface. She had a cat named Precedent, which told you everything you needed to know about her. She cooked real meals. She slept 7 hours and no more, was up at 5:30 every morning, and expected the same general discipline from anyone in her household. She gave me the guest room and told me I could paint it whatever color I wanted. I chose dark green. She bought the paint without comment. I transferred to a new school. No one knew about Priya, about my parents, about the storm. I was just Nadia, quiet, focused, a little guarded. I threw myself into coursework with the kind of urgency that comes from finally understanding what's at stake. Not just grades, evidence that I existed, that I thought, that I was worth the space I took up. Joe didn't baby me. That was the thing I needed most and didn't know I needed. She treated me like an adult in formation. She asked me what I thought about things. She brought work home. Not to show off, but because her work was her life, and she didn't hide her life from her household. I sat at the kitchen table watching her prepare for cases involving school districts, municipalities, systemic failures, institutions that had failed specific people in specific, preventable ways. I read her briefs when she let me. I asked questions she didn't dismiss. "You're going to do something with this," she said one night. I was 16. We were eating soup, and she'd just explained a case involving a school district that had systematically denied accommodations to low-income students. "You're going to be in this work somehow." "How do you know?" "Because you get angry at the right things," she said. "Most people get angry at the things that affect them personally. You get angry at the system. That's different." I thought about that for a long time. By my senior year, I had a plan, not vague, specific. I wanted to study computer science with a focus on civic technology. I'd been reading about apps and platforms that connected vulnerable populations with resources, legal aid, shelter, educational support, and I kept thinking about the gaps, about the people who fell through them, about 15-year-old girls in a storm with dead phones. I applied to 7 universities, got into 5, accepted a partial scholarship to a strong state program with a good CS department, and, crucially, a nonprofit tech incubator that gave students funding to build real projects. Joe's recommendation letter was 8 paragraphs. The night before I left for college, she cooked my favorite meal, jollof rice and fried plantains, and we sat at her kitchen table for 3 hours after dinner, just talking about the future, about fear, about what it meant to build a life out of materials people threw away. "What are you most afraid of?" she asked. I thought about it honestly, that I'll forget what it felt like, That I'll get comfortable and stop remembering why I'm doing this. She shook her head. You won't. Some things stay in the body. She touched her wrist, the echo of mine, healed but not forgotten. The good news is, so does resilience. College was a blur of code and clarity. I double majored in computer science and social policy. Summers, I interned at nonprofits and legal aid organizations, watching the tech they used, outdated, clunky, siloed, and thinking, I can fix this. I can build something better. In my junior year, for the incubator program, I built the first version of what would eventually become an app called Anchor. The concept was simple. One platform connecting at-risk young people, those aging out of foster care, those from unstable home situations, those between housing, with verified local resources, real-time openings at shelters, mentors in their area, emergency legal contacts. It was designed to work on the lowest-end smartphones. It was designed to function offline in areas with poor signal. It was designed by someone who had once been standing in the rain with a dead phone and no plan. Jo helped me beta test it. She connected me with colleagues who stress tested the legal structure. She stayed up late giving feedback on the UX. She never made me feel like I was building something small. This is going to matter, she told me when we did the first live demo. Seriously, Nadia, this is going to matter. I graduated with honors. Jo cried at the ceremony. I cried watching her cry. We drove home together. She made tea. I got a job offer before the milk was poured. Over the next 3 years, Anchor went from a pilot app in 2 counties to a fully funded platform operating in 23 cities. We had a team of 12. We had grants from 4 major foundations and a partnership with a national network of youth emergency services. We'd connected over 3,000 young people with resources they wouldn't have found on their own. I'd been invited to speak at conferences, written about in tech journals, featured in a piece about young civic tech founders that got shared widely. I told my story carefully in those spaces, the broad strokes, the system failures, the 15-year-old who needed something that didn't exist yet. Never names, never specifics. I kept my personal life and my work life in the same place because they were always the same thing. Then my colleague Daria knocked on my office door on an ordinary Tuesday. Nadia, I've got something from the State Innovation and Equity Summit. They want you for opening keynote. They're specifically requesting, and I'm reading this directly, a founder whose work embodies lived equity and systemic resilience. When is it? Spring, May 14th. She handed me the briefing folder. I flipped through it, venue, agenda, sponsors, list of affiliated institutions. My eye landed on one name halfway down the sponsor list, Carver Group Communications and Media Consultancy. I knew that name. A friend from my old neighborhood had mentioned it in passing months ago. Your sister works there now, you know, PR or something? I closed the folder. Daria, I said slowly, can you find out which representatives from each sponsor company will be seated in the main auditorium? She blinked. Sure, why? I just want to understand the room. 2 days later, she came back with the attendee breakdown. Carver Group, 4 seats, row 6. That night, I called Jo, told her everything. They have no idea you're the speaker? The program lists my name, but Priya doesn't follow my work. My parents don't either. They removed me from their lives pretty thoroughly. A pause on the line. What do you want to happen? The same question she'd asked me at 15, different context. What do you want? I want to close it properly. Not for them, for me. I want to stand on that stage and tell the truth about who I am and how I got here, and let them reckon with what they see. That's not revenge. No, I was sure of this. It's not. Revenge would be showing up to hurt them. This is showing up to be whole. There's a difference. Jo was quiet for a moment. Then go be whole, she said. I'll be front row. I called Daria the next morning, told her to confirm my acceptance. The weeks before the summit, I checked Priya's social media once, just once, out of something I won't call curiosity and won't call anything else either. She posted frequently. Her life looked well curated, well lit. Brunches, work events, gym selfies with motivational captions. She had a lot of followers. Her profile said communications professional, Carver Group, and her bio read loving life and choosing joy every day. There was a photo of her with my parents from the previous Christmas. Mom looked thinner, a little tired. Dad's hair was fully gray now. They were smiling. The caption said, "My whole world in one photo. So grateful for the family I have." I put the phone face down on my desk. So grateful for the family I have. Not the family she'd dismantled, not the sister she'd erased. The family that remained after she'd burned everything down. I left my phone face down and wrote my speech. Jo wore a deep blue dress the morning of the summit. She picked me up at 7. We didn't talk much on the drive, comfortable silence, the kind that belongs to people who've built something real over years. The venue was a converted event center in the city's arts district, big glass walls, good acoustics, the kind of place that felt like it took ideas seriously. Staff were arranging chairs and running cables when we arrived. Registration tables lined the entrance. The program was stacked in neat piles. I picked one up. Opening keynote, Nadia Calloway, founder and executive director, Anchor Platform. My photo was on the cover. I stood there for a moment, holding it. "You okay?" Jo touched my arm. "I'm really okay," I said, and I meant it. The venue director, a brisk woman named Maya, walked me through the stage layout, the microphone, the teleprompter I'd already told her I wouldn't be using. I'd memorized everything. The words were mine. I didn't need them fed back to me. Behind the curtain, stage left, I found a gap where I could see into the auditorium as it filled. I stood there and watched. Families and colleagues and professionals filing in, checking programs, settling into rows. The energy of a room that expected to be changed by something. And then, row 6, third seat from the left, Priya. She was in a navy blazer, hair pulled back, professional. She was saying something to the woman beside her, gesturing at her phone, smiling. Easy, comfortable, the way you look when you belong somewhere. She hadn't seen the program yet. She was on her phone, she looked fine. Row 6, 2 seats to her left, 2 figures I would have recognized from a mile away, because some things are permanent even when you wish they weren't. Mom and Dad, invited as family guests of Priya's company based on what Daria had confirmed. Both dressed carefully, Dad in a suit, Mom with a brooch on her lapel that I remembered from childhood. They had no idea. 2 minutes, Maya said behind me. I turned away from the gap in the curtain, found Jo's face in the front row. She nodded once, small and certain. I smoothed my blazer, took a full breath, walked to the wings. The summit director's voice filled the auditorium. "It is my honor to introduce someone whose work has redefined how we think about equitable access for vulnerable youth. She's a founder, a technologist, and advocate, and an example of exactly what this summit is built to celebrate. Please welcome Nadia Calloway." The applause was warm and building, and I walked into the light. The stage was wide, the podium was centered. Beyond the front rows, the audience blurred into a single living thing. I reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, looked out. And then I watched it happen. Row 6, third seat from the left. Priya, still half looking at her phone, glanced up at the stage the way audiences do, polite obligation, and then something registered. The angle of my face, the way I carried my shoulders, something from 13 years ago that the body remembers before the mind catches up. Her phone lowered. Her expression went strange. Confusion, then the specific, awful clarity of recognition. Her mouth opened slightly, both hands gripped the program in her lap. The woman beside her said something, "You okay?" and Priya didn't respond. Behind her, row 8, Dad leaned forward as my voice filled the auditorium for the first time, and something happened to him. His head tilted, his jaw worked. He put his hand on Mom's arm without looking at her. Mom's hand flew to the program in her lap, found my photo on the cover, looked back up at the stage. I watched her face understand. I smiled, professional, warm. "Good morning. Thank you for that generous introduction. My name is Nadia Calloway, and I built something because I needed it and it didn't exist." The room settled into attention. "I want to tell you about a gap." I kept my voice steady, conversational, the way Joe had taught me. Not performance, not declaration, just truth spoken clearly to people who were paying attention. Not a gap in the data, not a gap in the research, though those exist too, a gap in the most literal sense, the space between a person in crisis and the help that exists for them, the chasm that swallows people whole when the systems designed to catch them aren't connected to each other, aren't accessible, aren't built for the worst moments. The room was very quiet. I know that gap personally. I paused, let it land. When I was 15, I found myself on the wrong side of it. A shift in the room, subtle, collective. I had been told I was a liar, told I had done something I hadn't, and I had been sent outside on a November night by the people who were supposed to protect me. Mom's hand was on her mouth. Dad was completely still. I had a dead phone and nowhere to go, and I walked until I couldn't anymore. I looked out over the auditorium, not at row 6, not at row 8, just out, at all of them, the full room. Someone found me. She was a stranger. She didn't have to stay. She stayed anyway. And she stayed the next day and the day after that. And for the next 12 years, she has been the reason I became someone capable of building something useful. Joe's eyes were bright. She smiled at me. Anchor exists because I was 15 and I needed something that didn't exist, a platform that worked in the dark, in the rain, on the worst night, something that said, "You are not alone. Here is a real door you can walk through right now." I could hear Priya's breathing from 6 rows back. Maybe that's possible. Maybe I just felt it. We have connected 3,247 young people with emergency resources since our launch 18 months ago. We have partnerships in 23 cities. We have a team of 12 people who show up every day because they understand what it costs a person to fall through a gap. I looked directly at the audience, found no specific face, addressed all of them. Every one of those 3,247 people had someone in their life who failed them, a family member, an institution, a system, someone who chose the easier story over the true one. The auditorium was silent, the way a room goes silent when something important is being said. What I want you to know, what this program exists to prove, is that a single person choosing to show up can change the entire outcome. Not a system, not a policy, though those matter too, a person. I stepped back from the podium slightly, more personal now. The woman who stayed beside my hospital bed that night didn't know she was going to change my life. She was just doing what she knew was right. But it compounded. It built. It became Anchor. It became 3,247 doors. Full standing ovation. Not polite, immediate, building, real. I stepped back from the podium, let it wash over me. From the wings, Joe was already on her feet, clapping slowly, tears on her face, smiling. Row 6, Priya was sitting completely still, both hands in her lap. Her colleagues were standing around her and she wasn't moving, just staring at the stage. Row 8, Dad stood up slowly, mechanically, his hands shaking. I could see it from the stage, the way they trembled together when he brought them up to clap. Mom stood beside him, already crying in earnest, mascara dissolved, a tissue pressed under each eye. They clapped. They owed me at least that. I left the stage and walked into the wings and breathed. "You were extraordinary," Joe said and hugged me. The rest of the ceremony passed. Awards were given. Companies were recognized. Priya walked up to receive a sponsor plaque for Carver Group, and her hands were visibly unsteady. Her smile looked like something she'd installed incorrectly. Her colleagues took photos. She stared at the camera like she'd forgotten how her face worked. Afterward, in the reception area, I was surrounded. The summit director, funders, journalists, young people from partner organizations who wanted to tell me about the app, about the moment it had helped them. I talked to all of them, genuinely, because every one of those conversations was the reason I was there. Joe was beside me when the Callaways found us. They came together. Dad first, Mom just behind, Priya several steps back, hovering near a pillar like she wasn't sure she had the right to be in the conversation. Nadia, Dad's voice, older, quieter than I remembered. I turned. He looked like someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and finally understood he couldn't put it down. We didn't know it was you, the speaker. We had no... Priya had said the keynote was someone in civic tech, and we didn't think... I know, I said. I know you didn't know. Mom reached toward me, stopped herself. You look... Nadia, you look so well. I am well. We've tried to find you. Over the years, we tried. I didn't want to be found. Simple, not cruel. I needed years to build something I could stand on before I came back into a room with you. Dad's jaw worked. That's... Nadia, I am so sorry. I need you to know that. What I said to you that night, what I did, I have not... There is not a day I know, I said. We believed her, Mom whispered. We shouldn't have. We should have... Protected me, I said, finishing it. Yes, you should have. The silence between us was honest for the first time in 12 years. Did you hear the speech? I asked. Every word, Dad said. Then you know what I built from what happened, and you know I'm okay. That's what I came here to show you. Not to shame you, not to collect an apology. I came here to show you that I'm okay. Dad's eyes were full. Mom had her hand over her mouth again. Can we... He started. No, I said, gently. Not right now. Maybe not ever. That door is something I'll decide on my own timeline, and right now, it's closed. Nadia, Priya's voice, quiet, coming behind our parents. She stepped forward, and for the first time in 12 years, I was looking directly at her face. Grown up, 25 years old, something in her expression that had finally stopped being a performance. I know nothing I say. Then say it anyway, I said. She blinked. I'm sorry. I've been sorry for 12 years, and I've spent 12 years being too scared to do anything with that. I told people you died. Her voice broke. That's who I became. That's what I had to keep lying about to keep the first lie standing, and I became someone I don't like. I haven't liked her for a long time. I looked at her, really looked. 25, not 13. Accountable in a way that 13 hadn't been capable of. I forgive you, but that's for me, not for you. It doesn't mean we have a relationship. I know. You have things to work out that don't involve me. What you told people, who you became to maintain a lie, that's yours to carry and yours to fix. She nodded, tears rolling. Okay, I said, quietly. Okay. Joe touched my elbow. Nadia, the Westfield Foundation director wants a moment before you leave. I'll be right there. I looked at my parents, both of them, one last time. I'm glad you were here today. I needed witnesses. And I walked away. I need to pause just for a second here, because that moment, standing in that atrium, watching my father's hands shake, and finally having the language for what I'd needed from them for 12 years, that took longer than the speech did. If you've ever had to set a boundary with your family that felt like an act of self-preservation rather than cruelty, drop a comment. I think more people need to hear that those aren't the same thing. And if you've been here with me this whole story, please subscribe. I share these stories because I believe the right person hearing them at the right moment can change something real. Okay, the aftermath. The week after the summit, 3 things happened. 1, the speech was clipped, shared on social media, and accumulated 500,000 views before I'd finished reading my morning emails. The clip was the section about the gap. A person, not a policy. A person. That was the part that traveled. comments poured in from people who had built things from broken beginnings, from educators, from social workers, from young people who recognized themselves in the 15-year-old walking in the rain. I talked to all of them, genuinely, because every one of those conversations was the reason I was there. Joe was beside me when the Callaways found us. They came together. Dad first, Mom just behind, Priya several steps back, hovering near a pillar like she wasn't sure she had the right to be in the conversation. Nadia, Dad's voice, older, quieter than I remembered. I turned. He looked like someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and finally understood he couldn't put it down. We didn't know it was you, the speaker. We had no... Priya had said the keynote was someone in civic tech, and we didn't think... I know, I said. I know you didn't know. Mom reached toward me, stopped herself. You look... Nadia, you look so well. I am well. We've tried to find you. Over the years, we tried. I didn't want to be found. Simple, not cruel. I needed years to build something I could stand on before I came back into a room with you. Dad's jaw worked. That's... Nadia, I am so sorry. I need you to know that. What I said to you that night, what I did, I have not... There is not a day I know, I said. We believed her, Mom whispered. We shouldn't have. We should have protected me, I said, finishing it. Yes, you should have. The silence between us was honest for the first time in 12 years. Did you hear the speech? I asked. Every word, Dad said. Then you know what I built from what happened, and you know I'm okay. That's what I came here to show you. Not to shame you, not to collect an apology. I came here to show you that I'm okay. Dad's eyes were full. Mom had her hand over her mouth again. Can we... he started. No, I said, gently. Not right now. Maybe not ever. That door is something I'll decide on my own timeline, and right now, it's closed. Nadia, Priya's voice, quiet, coming behind our parents. She stepped forward, and for the first time in 12 years, I was looking directly at her face. Grown up, 25 years old, something in her expression that had finally stopped being a performance. I know nothing I say. Then say it anyway, I said. She blinked. I'm sorry. I've been sorry for 12 years, and I've spent 12 years being too scared to do anything with that. I told people you died. Her voice broke. That's who I became. That's what I had to keep lying about to keep the first lie standing, and I became someone I don't like. I haven't liked her for a long time. I looked at her, really looked. 25, not 13. Accountable in a way that 13 hadn't been capable of. I forgive you, but that's for me, not for you. It doesn't mean we have a relationship. I know. You have things to work out that don't involve me. What you told people, who you became to maintain a lie, that's yours to carry and yours to fix. She nodded, tears rolling. Okay, I said, quietly. Okay. Joe touched my elbow. Nadia, the Westfield Foundation director wants a moment before you leave. I'll be right there. I looked at my parents, both of them, one last time. I'm glad you were here today. I needed witnesses. And I walked away. I need to pause just for a second here, because that moment, standing in that atrium, watching my father's hands shake, and finally having the language for what I'd needed from them for 12 years, that took longer than the speech did. If you've ever had to set a boundary with your family that felt like an act of self-preservation rather than cruelty, drop a comment. I think more people need to hear that those aren't the same thing. And if you've been here with me this whole story, please subscribe. I share these stories because I believe the right person hearing them at the right moment can change something real. Okay, the aftermath. The week after the summit, 3 things happened. 1, the speech was clipped, shared on social media, and accumulated 500,000 views before I'd finished reading my morning emails. The clip